Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're going to be exploring something kind of fascinating today. The potential of zinc to help manage blood sugar, especially for those of us, carrying around a few extra pounds.
Yeah, it's a connection that's definitely getting more attention in the research world these days.
For sure. And we're basing our deep dive today on a 2023 meta-analysis from Obesity Research and Clinical Practice. These meta-analyses are great because they pull data from lots of individual studies. In this case, it's 12 different trials, all randomized and controlled, involving over 651 overweight or obese folks. Helps us see the bigger picture.
Absolutely, yeah. It's like having a bird's eye view of the research landscape instead of just looking at individual trees. And this particular one was by Hao-Yu Yang and colleagues. And it highlights some really promising findings about zinc and blood sugar regulation.
So before we get to the specifics of the zinc research, I think it helps to take a step back. And think about obesity and diabetes. When we all know that being overweight or obese is a risk factor for type 2 diabetes, but what's the underlying mechanism there?
Well, a big part of the problem is chronic low-grade inflammation, particularly in our fat tissue. It's like having this constant low hum of inflammation. That disrupts how our bodies handle glucose, which is, the sugar our cells need for energy.
So this inflammation is kind of throwing a wrench in the whole system.
Exactly. It messes with insulin, which is the hormone that allows glucose to get into our cells. And when there's chronic inflammation, our cells can become resistant to insulin, meaning they just don't respond as well. And this can lead to elevated blood sugar levels over time. And that sets the stage for type 2 diabetes.
So if you're someone who is concerned about blood sugar control, or maybe you have a family history of diabetes, paying attention to this research could be pretty important for you.
I couldn't agree more. And that's where zinc comes in. It might surprise you to learn that zinc plays a key role in all of this.
Yeah, I'll admit I mostly think of zinc as something I take when I feel a cold coming on.
Right. Well, that's certainly one of its roles, boosting the immune system. But zinc is a real multitasker when it comes to our health. It's a vital component of many enzymes, and it plays a role in tons of bodily functions. Everything from wound healing to, blood sugar regulation.
Okay, so how does zinc fit into this puzzle of blood sugar and inflammation?
Well, one of the first things this meta-analysis pointed out was that people with impaired glucose control often have lower zinc levels. So that immediately raised a flag for the researchers. Like, could there be a connection? Could boosting zinc intake potentially help?
It's like a clue that leads you down a new path of investigation.
Precisely. And to explore that path, they analyzed the results of those 12 randomized controlled trials. The participants were all either overweight or obese, and they were randomly assigned to receive either zinc supplements or placebo.
And what did they find? Did the zinc actually make a difference?
The results were really encouraging. Across these trials, zinc supplementation led to some statistically significant improvements in key markers of blood sugar control.
Okay, let's break that down a bit. What specific markers are we talking about?
Well, one of the most important ones was fasting glucose. That's just a measure of your blood sugar levels. After you've been fasting, typically overnight, the zinc groups consistently showed reductions in fasting glucose.
So lower fasting glucose, that's a good sign, right?
Definitely. It means the body is handling glucose more efficiently. They also saw improvements in a measure called HOAI-IR, which basically tells us how resistant the body is to insulin.
So if HR improves, that means insulin resistance is going down.
Exactly. And lower insulin resistance is a good thing. It means insulin can do its job more effectively, helping get glucose into cells where it's needed.
Got it. So we've got improvements in fasting glucose and insulin resistance. What else did this meta-analysis reveal?
They also found improvements in HbA1c. This is a measure of long-term blood sugar control. Think of it like a snapshot of your average blood sugar levels over the past 2 to 3 months.
So it's like a report card for how well you've been managing your blood sugar over time.
That's a good analogy. And zinc supplementation was linked to better grades, so to speak. And finally, they found improvements in what's called 2-hour postprandial glucose, which is just a fancy way of saying your blood sugar level 2 hours after eating.
So zinc seems to be helping with both short-term and long-term blood sugar control, both in a fasting state and after meals. That's pretty impressive.
It is. Now, it's important to remember that some of these outcomes were more consistently positive than others, and there's still more research to be done. But overall, meta-analysis paints a pretty promising picture of zinc's potential role in blood sugar regulation.
Okay, so we've got these positive findings. But as with any research, there are always nuances and details to consider. What else did this meta-analysis uncover that we should be aware of?
That's a great question. And it leads us to one of the most fascinating parts of this research, the subgroup analysis. Essentially, the researchers dug deeper into the data to see if there were any patterns in who benefited most from zinc supplementation. And what they found is where things get really interesting.
Ooh, I love when things get interesting. Lay it on me. What did they discover?
One of the most surprising findings was that taking zinc alone, without any other supplements, seemed to be more effective for both fasting glucose and HOMA-IR.
Wait, so popping a zinc supplement on its own might be better than taking it as part of a multivitamin or some other combination formula?
That's what the data suggests, yeah. It really challenges the assumption that more is always better when it comes to supplements.
Okay, that's definitely something to note. What other interesting patterns did they find in the subgroups?
Well, they noticed that higher doses of zinc, specifically 30 milligrams or more per day, were associated with more significant reductions in fasting glucose.
Interesting. So dosage seems to play a role. This makes me wonder about how much zinc I'm actually getting in my diet, or not getting, as the case may be, but I'm sure we'll discuss those kind of practical considerations later on.
We will definitely dive into those details, don't worry. Safety is paramount when it comes to any kind of supplementation.
Absolutely. So we've got zinc potentially improving blood sugar control in overweight and obese individuals.
Yeah.
And it seems like taking it alone and at higher doses might be the most effective strategy. What else did the subgroup analysis reveal?
Well, one finding that really caught my eye was that the most dramatic improvements in fasting glucose were seen in the participants who already had diabetes. This raises a really interesting question. Could zinc potentially be even more helpful for managing existing diabetes in this population?
Now, that would be a game changer if zinc could play a significant role in diabetes management. It's certainly an avenue worth exploring further.
I agree. More research is needed to confirm these findings, but the possibilities are exciting.
Okay, so we've got zinc potentially improving blood sugar control. For people who are overweight or obese, maybe even playing a bigger role in managing existing diabetes. But how is it actually working? What's the mechanism behind all of this?
That's the million-dollar question. And unfortunately, we don't have all the answers yet. Research is ongoing, but scientists have proposed a few ways that zinc might be working its magic. One idea focuses on a protein called GLUT4.
GLUT4. So, okay, refresh my memory. What does that one do again?
GLUT4 is basically a transporter protein. Its job is to move glucose from the bloodstream into our cells. And it seems that zinc might influence GLUT4, potentially enhancing its activity.
So zinc could be like a key that helps unlock the door for glucose to enter our cells more easily.
That's one way to think about it. And it's not just about getting glucose into the cells, but also about how our bodies respond to insulin, the hormone that signals for glucose uptake. Zinc is thought to play a role in some of the enzymes that are crucial for insulin signaling.
So by supporting those enzymes, zinc could be helping to fine-tune the body's response to insulin, making the whole process more efficient.
Precisely. So whether it's boosting glucose transport or optimizing insulin signaling, zinc seems to be playing a supportive role on multiple levels. But it's important to stress that we need more research to fully understand these mechanisms.
Of course, science is a process of ongoing discovery. And this is just one piece of the puzzle. So we've got zinc potentially improving blood sugar control and maybe even helping manage diabetes. And we've gotten a glimpse of how it might be working at the cellular level. But I'm sure our listeners are wondering about the practical implications of all of this. What does this research mean for them?
That's a great point. As much as we love digging into the science, responsible application is crucial. And that brings us to the important topic of cautions and considerations when it comes to zinc supplementation.
Okay, let's talk safety. What do people need to know before they run out and buy a bottle of zinc?
Well, first and foremost, even though this research is very encouraging, it's not a green light to start megadosing on zinc. Excessive intake can lead to some unpleasant side effects.
Like what kinds of side effects?
Well, gastrointestinal upset is common. Things like nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. Some people also experience headaches, dizziness, or a metallic taste in their mouth.
Okay, those don't sound like much fun. Anything else we should be aware of?
Yes, this is important. Excessive zinc intake can actually interfere with the absorption of copper, which is another essential mineral, and copper deficiency can be a serious issue.
Copper deficiency. Now that does sound concerning. What are the implications of not getting enough copper?
Copper is involved in a lot of important bodily functions. It's crucial for red blood cell formation, nerve function, and immune health. So a deficiency can lead to fatigue, weakness, anemia, and even nerve problems.
Wow, so it's definitely not something to take lightly.
Exactly, and that's precisely why it's so crucial to talk to your doctor or a qualified healthcare provider. Before you start taking zinc supplements, they can assess your individual needs, look for any potential risks based on your health history, or medications you're taking, and help you figure out the right dosage, if supplementation is appropriate at all.
So the key message here is personalized care. What works for one person might not work for another, and self-prescribing can be risky.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Informed decision-making is always the best policy.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground today. The link between obesity and diabetes, the potential benefits of zinc supplementation, the possible mechanisms at play, and the importance of safety and personalized care. What are some key takeaways our listeners should keep in mind?
Well, the main takeaway is that zinc shows real promise for improving blood sugar control in overweight and obese individuals. The research we've discussed today suggests it can have a positive impact on various blood sugar markers, including fasting glucose insulin resistance and long-term control.
And we learned that taking zinc on its own, rather than as part of a multi-nutrient formula, might actually be the most effective approach.
That's right. And dosage matters too. Higher doses within safe limits, of course, seem to be more effective for lowering fasting glucose.
And let's not forget that intriguing finding about zinc's potential role in managing existing diabetes. That's an area that definitely needs more research.
Absolutely. But no matter how promising the research might be, it's vital to remember that safety comes first. Talk to your doctor before starting any new supplements, including zinc.
Excellent advice. Before we wrap up completely, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought to ponder. Based on everything we've discussed today, could zinc play a bigger role in diabetes prevention and management than we previously thought? Could it eventually become a standard part of the conversation when it comes to diabetes care?
It's a fascinating question and one that researchers are actively investigating. This meta-analysis certainly adds more weight to the argument for further exploration.
Well, on that note, we'll wrap up part 1 of our deep dive into zinc and blood sugar control. We'll pick up the conversation in part 2, where we'll explore some additional research on zinc and its potential role in overall metabolic health.
We'll be delving into the fascinating world of zinc and inflammation. Until then, keep those brains curious. Welcome back to the deep dive. We're continuing our exploration of zinc, that intriguing mineral that's showing us it might be more important for metabolic health than we once thought.
Yeah, that's like zinc has been, hiding in plain sight all along, quietly working behind the scenes. In part 1, we dove into a meta-analysis that revealed zinc supplementation led to some pretty remarkable improvements in blood sugar control, especially for folks who are overweight or obese.
Right, we saw how zinc might be able to enhance insulin sensitivity, helping our cells use glucose more effectively, and even potentially playing a role in managing existing diabetes.
Right, and one of the key takeaways was that taking zinc alone, without a bunch of other supplements, might actually be the most effective approach.
Exactly. It challenges that more is always better mindset when it comes to supplements. But the story of zinc and metabolic health doesn't end there. We're going to shift gears a bit now and explore another facet of zinc's potential, its impact on inflammation.
Okay, now we're talking. We touched on inflammation briefly in part 1, talking about how chronic low-grade inflammation, especially in fat tissue, can really mess with our metabolic processes.
Right. It's like having this constant simmering fire in the background, disrupting everything. And as we're learning, zinc seems to have some firefighting capabilities.
So zinc's got more than one superpower. Tell me more about its anti-inflammatory action.
Well, zinc has long been recognized for its role in immune function, and a robust immune system is essential for keeping inflammation in check. It's like having a well-trained army ready to defend against invaders.
So could zinc be working on 2 fronts, helping with blood sugar control and also tamping down inflammation?
That's the idea. And there's a growing body of research to support this concept. In fact, there's a study from 2014 published in the journal Biological Trace Element Research that specifically looked at zinc's anti-inflammatory effects in young, obese women.
Okay, tell me more about this study. How is it designed?
The researchers divided 40 young obese women into 2 groups. One group received 30 milligrams of zinc gluconate daily for 8 weeks, while the other group received a placebo.
A classic randomized controlled trial setup. What kinds of things did they measure to see if the zinc was making a difference?
They tracked various factors, including body weight, BMI, and most importantly for our discussion, the levels of inflammatory markers in their blood. These markers are like signals that tell us how much inflammation is present in the body.
So did the zinc have any effect on these inflammatory markers?
The results were pretty compelling. The group that received zinc experienced significant reductions in several key inflammatory markers, including C-reactive protein, or CRP, and tumor necrosis factor alpha, which is known as TNF-alpha.
Okay, those names sound pretty technical. What exactly are CRP and TNF-alpha, and why are they important?
Think of them as messengers that indicate inflammation in the body. CRP is a general marker of inflammation, kind of like a fire alarm going off in your body. It's produced by the liver and is often used to assess cardiovascular risk.
So if CRP levels go down, that's a good sign.
Exactly. It suggests that inflammation is decreasing. TNF-alpha, on the other hand, is a more specific type of inflammatory messenger, a cytokine. It plays a role in various chronic diseases, from rheumatoid arthritis to inflammatory bowel disease.
So seeing zinc lower both CRP and TNF-alpha suggests it's really having a positive impact on the inflammatory process.
Precisely. And remember, this study focused specifically on young obese women. This adds to the evidence that zinc might be especially helpful for managing inflammation in individuals struggling with weight issues.
It's like zinc is a 2-for-1 deal, tackling blood sugar and inflammation simultaneously.
I love that analogy. And what's fascinating is that these two actions of zinc on blood sugar and inflammation are interconnected. If you recall from part 1, we discussed how inflammation in fat tissue can disrupt insulin signaling.
Right. It's like the inflammation is jamming the signal, preventing insulin from doing its job properly.
Exactly. And that's where zinc's anti-inflammatory effect comes into play. By reducing inflammation, zinc might indirectly improve insulin sensitivity as well.
It's a beautiful cascade of benefits. Less inflammation leads to better blood sugar control, which could potentially lead to even less inflammation, creating a positive feedback loop.
It really highlights the interconnectedness of everything in our bodies.
Zinc is like the conductor of an orchestra, making sure everything works together in harmony.
I love that image. It emphasizes the importance of considering nutrients like zinc, not just for their individual effects, but also for their broader impact on the whole system.
It's a great reminder that even seemingly small changes, like adjusting the intake of a single mineral, can have ripple effects throughout the body.
That's the beauty of understanding how our bodies work. But before we get too carried away, let's bring this back down to earth and talk about something practical, getting zinc through our diet.
Right. We've been focusing on supplementation. But food is always the foundation, right?
Absolutely. While zinc supplements can be helpful in certain situations, a balanced diet rich in zinc-containing foods is the best way to ensure you're getting enough of this vital nutrient.
So let's talk food. What are some good sources of zinc that we can easily incorporate into our meals?
Well, oysters are actually one of the richest sources of zinc, but I realize they're not everyone's cup of tea.
I'll have to pass on the oysters. What are some other options?
Meat lovers rejoice. Red meat and poultry are excellent sources of zinc. Beans are another great option, and they're packed with protein and fiber too, for those who enjoy snacking. Nuts and seeds, like pumpkin seeds and cashews, are good choices.
And what about for the vegetarians and vegans out there?
Yeah.
Are there any plant-based sources of zinc that they should be aware of?
Absolutely. Lentils are a fantastic source of zinc, as is tofu, so there are plenty of options to choose from, no matter your dietary preferences.
It sounds like a varied and balanced diet can go a long way in ensuring adequate zinc intake for most people. But what about those who might be at higher risk of zinc deficiency? Are there any specific groups we should be thinking about?
Yes, definitely. Pregnant women and breastfeeding mothers have increased zinc needs, so it's important for them to pay close attention to their intake. Vegetarians and vegans are also at higher risk of deficiency, simply because plant-based sources of zinc aren't as easily absorbed as animal-based sources.
And I imagine certain health conditions can increase the risk of deficiency as well.
You're absolutely right. People with digestive disorders, like Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, often have trouble absorbing nutrients, including zinc. And those with chronic liver or kidney disease might also be at risk.
So it's crucial to talk to a healthcare provider if you have any concerns about your zinc levels.
Yes, huh?
Especially if you fall into one of these higher risk categories.
I couldn't agree more. A healthcare professional can assess your individual needs and recommend the best course of action, whether it's dietary changes, supplementation, or a combination of both.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive. We've learned about zinc's role as an anti-inflammatory agent its potential to improve insulin sensitivity, and the importance of getting enough zinc through our diet. But as always, there's more to this story.
You're right. We've explored the benefits and the dietary sources, but now it's time to address the elephant in the room, the nuances and complexities of zinc supplementation.
Excellent point. In Part 3, we'll delve into those details. We'll discuss dosage considerations, potential risks, and the importance of working with a healthcare professional to make informed decisions about supplementation.
We'll equip you with the knowledge you need to approach zinc supplementation safely and responsibly. So stay tuned for the final part of our zinc deep dive.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We're wrapping up our exploration of zinc and its potential in the realm of metabolic health.
Over the past 2 parts, we've uncovered some fascinating insights about zinc, its ability to influence blood sugar, control its anti-inflammatory powers, and even the importance of, getting enough of it through our diet.
It's been quite a journey. And in this final part, we're going to shift our focus to the practical side of things, zinc supplementation. We've hinted at some of the cautions and considerations, but now we'll dive into those details more thoroughly.
It's like we've been exploring a map, and now we're zooming in on a particular area to get a closer look at the terrain.
Exactly. And one of the first landmarks on this terrain is dosage. In Part 1, we discussed how that meta-analysis found that higher doses of zinc, 30 milligrams or more per day, were linked to better improvements in fasting blood sugar.
Right, and that often leads to the question, if some is good, is more always better?
It's a natural assumption to make, but as we've seen with zinc, it's not always that straightforward.
Exactly. When it comes to nutrients, there's a sweet spot, so to speak. Too little, and you might miss out on the benefits. Too much, and you could run into problems.
So how do we find that sweet spot for zinc? What's considered a safe and effective dosage?
Well, the recommended daily allowance, or RDA, for zinc varies a bit depending on factors like age and gender. But for most adults, it falls somewhere between 8 and 11 milligrams per day.
Okay, so the higher doses used in some studies are exceeding the RDA. Does that mean those higher doses are unsafe?
Not necessarily. In research settings, higher doses are often used to investigate specific effects. But for everyday supplementation, it's generally recommended to stay within safe limits.
And what are those safe limits for zinc?
The tolerable upper intake level, or UL, for zinc is 40 milligrams per day for adults. Going above that amount increases the risk of experiencing those unpleasant side effects we talked about earlier, things like nausea, vomiting, and headaches.
Right, and we definitely don't want to trade potential benefits for a bunch of unwanted side effects.
Absolutely. And that's why seeking personalized guidance from a healthcare professional is so crucial. They can look at your individual situation, consider any underlying health conditions or medications you're taking, and help you figure out the appropriate dosage if supplementation is even necessary.
So it's all about finding that personalized sweet spot, getting enough zinc to reap the potential benefits without going overboard and risking side effects.
Exactly. And beyond dosage, there's another important consideration we need to talk about: the potential interaction between zinc and copper.
We touched on this in Part 2, explaining how taking too much zinc can interfere with copper absorption. But let's dive a little deeper into that. Why is copper so important? What happens if we don't get enough?
Copper is an essential mineral that plays a role in a surprising number of bodily functions. It's involved in red blood cell formation, nerve function, immune health, and even the production of collagen, which is important for healthy skin and connective tissues.
So copper deficiency isn't something to take lightly.
Definitely not. A deficiency can manifest in a variety of ways: fatigue, weakness, anemia, nerve problems, and in severe cases, it can even lead to neurological issues.
That's pretty serious stuff.
Yeah.
So if someone is supplementing with zinc, what steps can they take to make sure they're not inadvertently causing a copper deficiency?
That's a great question, and the first step is awareness. Simply being aware of the potential interaction between zinc and copper is a good starting point. If you're taking zinc supplements, it's wise to talk to your doctor about getting your copper levels checked, especially if you're taking zinc long-term.
And what about diet? Can we get enough copper through the foods we eat?
Absolutely. Lots of foods are rich in copper. Liver is a top source, though not everyone enjoys that. But things like shellfish, nuts, seeds, beans, and even dark chocolate contain copper.
Dark chocolate, now you're talking my language.
Right. So a balanced diet can go a long way in ensuring adequate copper intake. But if you're supplementing with zinc, it's always a good idea to discuss this potential interaction with your healthcare provider. They can help you assess your individual needs and make recommendations based on your specific situation.
It all comes back to that personalized approach. What works for one person might not work for another, and there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
I couldn't agree more. It's about empowering yourself with knowledge, asking questions, and working collaboratively with your healthcare team to make informed decisions about your health.
Okay, so we've talked about dosage, the zinc-copper interaction, and the importance of personalized care. Any other cautions or considerations we should touch on before we wrap up?
Well, it's worth mentioning that some people experience mild gastrointestinal upset when they first start taking zinc supplements.
We talked about the more severe GI issues that can happen with excessive zinc intake, but you're saying even at normal doses, some people might experience some discomfort.
Right. It's usually nothing serious, maybe some nausea or indigestion, and it often goes away on its own as the body adjusts. But if you experience any persistent or bothersome side effects, definitely talk to your doctor.
Good advice. And I think it's important to emphasize once again that supplements including zinc are not a magic bullet. They're not a replacement for a healthy lifestyle.
Absolutely. A balanced diet, regular exercise, stress management, all of these things play a crucial role in overall health and well-being. Supplements can be helpful tools, but they should be used strategically and thoughtfully as part of a holistic approach.
Well said. As we wrap up our deep dive into zinc and blood sugar control, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. We've learned that zinc is this fascinating mineral with a surprisingly wide range of effects in the body. From blood sugar regulation to immune function to even protecting against inflammation, it seems like zinc is involved in so many important processes.
It really highlights the interconnectedness of our biology and how even seemingly small changes, like adjusting the intake of a single nutrient, can have ripple effects throughout the system.
Exactly. So as always, we encourage you to keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking questions. Talk to your healthcare provider about whether zinc supplementation might be right for you, and consider how you can incorporate more zinc-rich foods into your diet.
And remember, the journey of discovery is ongoing. There's always more to learn, and each new piece of knowledge has the potential to empower us to make healthier choices.
Well, on that note, we'll wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, keep those brains curious.